Hi, everyone. Good morning from the DME for Peace team. My name is Jennifer Howell, and I'm actually joining you today from sunny and very hot South Carolina in the United States. Welcome to today's Thursday Talk. Our Thursday Talks are aimed to bring you the best and most innovative learning there is in the peace building field and beyond. Whether this is your first Thursday Talk or you're one of our regular participants, it's great to have you with us today. As I mentioned a moment ago, my name is Jennifer Howell, and I am the Communications and Learning Officer at Search for Common Ground and the Communications Lead for DME for Peace. I will be moderating today's session. So today, our discussion is focusing on the topic of shared societies as a framework for project planning and monitoring. And today our discussion will be led by Dr. Clem McCartney, Melanie Hussak, and Dr. Ron Kuttner, members of the Next Generation Shared Societies Theory and Practice Network. Clem McCartney is an independent consultant and policy and content coordinator of the Shared Societies project of the Club de Madrid from 2007 to 2019. Ron Kuttner, associate professor of the International Graduate Program for Peace and Conflict Management at the University of Haifa, Israel, and Melanie Hussak works for the at the Peace Academy in the Rhineland-Palatinate. Sorry, Melanie is a research fellow, I also want to mention, and it is so wonderful to have you all with us today. Just a note about how we will spend our time together. As our hosts are presenting, you can write your questions using the question function on your GoToWebinar dashboard, and we will address it once we reach the Q&A portion. When you do that, also, please write your name and affiliation if you're able and feel comfortable to. Can everyone hear me? I have one person who messaged saying they could not. If someone could also send a message to me, you can use the questions function. Let me know if you can hear me, or Clem, if you can hear me, let me know.
Yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you.
Perfect. So it's probably just a singular issue. I would recommend maybe logging out and using the same link to get back into the webinar. And a lot of times that fixes anyone's audio issues. Just a note if you're experiencing any. So with that, let me say thank you for joining us today, everyone, and to all three of our wonderful hosts. And I'm going to first hand it over to Clem. Take it away.
Thank you, Jennifer, and thank you to all of the DM&E team for inviting us to share with you today. And thanks to everyone who's come along to join in this discussion. What I'm going to do as briefly as I can give you an idea of who we are, this network, and also what this concept is that we're talking about, the shared societies, and why we think it's important. That's me, since you won't see me otherwise. So our topic is a shared society is a framework for policy planning and monitoring, because after all, that's what DM&E are concerned about. This concept, I'll start with who we are, the Next Generation Shared Society Theory and Practice Network. Sorry it's so long. We're a variety of people. We're activists, we're practitioners, we're policymakers, we're researchers, we're academics. We're working on conflict resolution, dialogue, peace building, reconciliation and dealing with legacy issues, and on policy formulation. We're working at local level, community level, city level, national level. None of the people actually involved in the network are particularly working at the global level, but we do work at the global level, but we haven't been majoring in that in the last couple of years. We've been brought together by our interest in the shared societies concept as a frame for developing our practice, because we believe it provides a perspective and helps to orient our approach. And we're committed to trying to promote this idea. So that's what the network exists for. We share and learn from each other, and we try to promote the idea. We've been going for about 3 years, and we had our first conference in Haifa in Israel, and that's some of the participants at the University of Haifa. Since then, we've been consigned to our own countries and to our own homes, and so we've been trying to do what we can on Zoom. Ran is at the top left there. Melanie is the third across in that same row. So we are, oh, yeah. So the question is, that is who we are, but what is a shared society? And what we would say is a shared society is where all those living there feel at home and that they belong. It respects everyone's dignity and human rights. It provides every individual with equal opportunity. It values diversity. It is tolerant. Not unusual ideas, but we feel that it's the idea that everybody is not just accepted and tolerated, but is a full and active participant in the society. It is socially cohesive society. It is stable and it is safe. We sometimes refer to this as a shared society indicates the way of life, culture, values, customs, practices, and benefits of the society are not owned by any one group, but belong to all. Now, this idea, it's an enabling society. Problems are understood as the concerns of everyone. People are concerned for others. They are ready to take responsibility. They exercise their judgment. They're willing to cooperate and work together for the good of all. And this happens because people feel wanted, valued, and respected. So again, I say it's not just a society where people feel that they are accepted and tolerated. And all of this reinforces the unique characteristics that make a shared society and build resilience when a whole of society response is needed. And we can see this in the recent times with, for example, COVID, that some societies were better able to adjust to this than others. Some were very divided and confrontational in the way that they dealt with the issues. And that would apply in many other situations as well. So the question is, how do we achieve a shared society? Now, a number of us have been working in this for maybe about 12 or 13 years. I worked with the Club de Madrid, which set up a project called the Shared Societies Project. And much of what I'll say in the next few minutes is what we formulated initially, but it's more or less accepted by all of us who are working in this, even though we come at it from different directions and from different experiences. So we see four guiding principles. There's respect for the dignity of everyone. There is respect for human rights and the rule of law. There's equality and fairness, and there's a democratic participation or voice. That doesn't mean that an autocratic society doesn't have an obligation, doesn't have to think about these things. And very often, even quite autocratic societies have ways in which they have to listen to voices which are coming towards them from outside their own particular elite leadership. We identified what we called 10 commitments or 10 elements which go to make up, which can need to be there if a society is to be a shared society. Some of them may exist already, some of them we can recognize as missing, and we can think about how we can create them or build them. So first of all, and I'm going to go through these very quickly, it's all in the materials that we put up on the blog and in the website. It locates responsibility of social cohesion within government structures. It creates opportunities for minorities to be consulted. And then, if I go on, we see it as having to have safeguards for parts of people in the society. It monitors structures and policies to ensure they're supportive of social cohesion. And it ensures the legal framework protects the rights of the individual. It deals with economic disadvantages faced by those discriminated against. It then looks at service provision, and there's 2 or 3 areas here, but we could mention many more. In terms of infrastructure, it ensures that physical environments create opportunities for social interaction. In terms of education, the education system must demonstrate a commitment to a shared society. And then in terms of people and the relationships between people, it will initiate a process to encourage the creation of a shared vision of society. It will commit to promote respect, understanding, and appreciation of diversity, and it will take steps to reduce tensions and hostility between communities. Those are, as you can see, extremely broad statements, but they encapsulate the different areas which need to be looked at. And if you think about those, there are distinct, we would argue there are distinctive features. All of you will be doing some of these things in your work, but we feel that we try to hold on to all the different elements and not focus on just one element. That, I think, is one of the distinctive features. Therefore, it is multifaceted, holistic, and interdependent. It is multi-level, it is people-centered, it's non-prescriptive, it's process-oriented, it's a society as the focus of change. So we very often say it's not a question of people adapting to society, but we need to create a society that works for the people. And a number of people now in politics talk about We need a society that works for all. Amen. And finally, what's distinctive, I think, is the nature of a shared society, because it is a society which works for the people in it. Sorry, I go back one. No, I leave that there. So we feel that these are distinctive things, but I'm not quite sure how to go back. I'd like to have kept that one with you for a minute or two longer, but sorry. The thing is that it creates a dilemma for us. I think it's a dilemma that all of us find in our work, because we have to avoid being reductive and ending up only talking about the basic form of the process and not the actual essence of what it is we're trying to do. That is a dilemma that we all face. And I had captured it there in 2 or 3 sentences. It's not, there's not a size that fits all. We have to think about what works separately in each individual place. And I quoted a slogan there, it was a song by Ella Fitzgerald: "It ain't what you do, it's the way that you do it." So we can all say we're doing the same thing, but we can do it in very different ways. We can do them in very top-down, ultra patronizing ways, or we can do them in ways which are really engaging and enabling and involving people with it. And the third one I quoted there, which is now gone, is: "The word killeth, but the spirit giveth life." In other words, if we follow the words and we don't capture the spirit of what it is we're doing, if we don't follow the letter, if we only follow the letter of the law, then we will find ourselves not really doing what it is that we're setting out to do. So that framework that we offered you there is a framework which we can use in policy. Are we following these lines? And it's also a framework for monitoring and evaluation. Are we achieving these ends? And how do we see the crossover between the different dimensions of what it is that's important? Because so often we get one thing right, and in doing that one thing right, we get unintended consequences, which are negative consequences in other areas. So what I want to do now, I've said that very briefly, it may have been hard to capture it all, but it is in the materials that we've sent to you. And what we're now going to do is invite 2 of our colleagues to talk a bit, because it's hard to give a formal structure. We're wanting to look at how people use these ideas in their work. And before I introduce, or before I hand over to Melanie, who will talk about how they have used this work in their evaluation work, I just want to say there are others of our network which are working in other dimensions. We're all based in Europe, and we have colleagues who are working in North Macedonia, and they're working on building one society for all. That was the term they had come to use for it, but it's virtually the same as what we are talking about here. And they're currently in the National Commission, which is developing the concept for being applied in the country, and trying to use a lens from a shared society to try to think how that can be expressed. And equally, at the other end of the scale, we have colleagues in Belgium who are working in the legacy of the past. And they're looking at the issues which are still rumbling from the Second World War, and they're looking at the colonial legacy of Belgium, which, as you know, has a rather sorry past. And one of our colleagues is on the expert advisory group to the National Commission on this. Will be giving evidence to the government in the next month, and going back to North Macedonia, they should be coming up with their plans quite soon. And I think at least Ran, if not Melanie, will be talking about how they have raised their insights with the government to try to bring about change. So very quickly, I will then now hand over to Melanie. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Clem. And then everyone, today we're going to do something a little different for us, but exciting. I will now be switching the presentation over to Melanie. So just wait a second as Melanie accepts. There you go. Thank you, Melanie. Take it away.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer, and thank you, Clem. So in my presentation, I will follow up on the introduction of the concept and illustrate a practical project planning on shared society in the field of migration and integration work in German cities I do together with my colleagues Ulrike Zeigermann, Jan-Peter Schilling, and Anna Reiter. So first I will outline the project background, context, and aims of our project. So the why we use the concept, before I then present our project elements, thus discussing the question of how we use the concept and how the concept can be used as a practical development tool. Finally, I will briefly discuss our experiences and what we think should be considered in the practical use of the concept. So the work with the concept came up as part of our international program that Clem described. So in the program, we are also aiming within the country teams to bring together research, theory, and practice, and also implementing projects. So we, on the one hand, are the staff of the Peace Academy of the University of Koblenz-Landau. It's a research institute with the character of an academy, which means that we also do science practice transfer. And in our work, we focus on the fields of crisis prevention and civil conflict management. On the other hand, it's the Advisory Council for Migration and Integration of the City of Trier, which organizes many activities in the field of migration and integration. So our common goal in the project is to implement measures towards a shared society. The background and context are the increasing influxes of newcomers to Germany in the last decade. So today, over 20 million people with a migrant background live in Germany, which is about 26% of the total population. So Germany is a country of immigrants since the 1950s. So in 2015, when many migrants came, most of the German public initially welcomed the refugees, and still a majority in the German society is very open to immigrants. But at the same time, despite political efforts, we see that the efforts were immediately challenged by right-wing populist groups. You can also see in the second picture, with the harsh anti-refugee and racist rhetoric, as well as violent attacks on refugee shelters by right-wing extremists. So there are social conflicts to be faced, which we wanted to address at the municipal level. Why did we choose the municipal level? Municipalities can play a very important role in the integration of migrants and also encourage the participation of diverse groups in societies, since local agency can flexibly react to regional dynamics and are also the authorities responsible for implementing strategies. So consequently, integration policies have been developed in many cities in Germany, which define instruments and institutions for reducing inequality, polarization, and tensions, but they much differ in the extent to which they address social cohesion, equity, and diversity. So for us, the shared society concept offers a framework that aims to realize the principles of cohesion, equality, diversity, and participation at all levels of society. So the concept, therefore, fundamentally different from assimilation discourses, which can be understood as processes of conforming and adapting to the social environment of the host country without full recognition of one's own identity. And it also goes beyond integration concepts, so which can be understood as the interaction between majority and minority societies with demands made by both, but limited within the focus on the absorbing integration of the smaller groups into the larger one. So this is the content-related reason why we chose the concept of shared society. The second one is that it gives us orientation on which structural level and also on which level of action we could initiate transformation processes. So our project therefore has a practical component as well as a research component in which we address the question through evaluation and further research: how could municipal integration policies contribute to shared societies? So before we start our project implementation in Trier, we did an evaluation of the integration work they did so far, but to gain more insights besides our experiences from Trier, we have also turned our attention to other cities in Germany and did an empirical analysis consisting of a systematic comparison of the formulation and implementation of integration policies in 5 cities. We have already heard from Clem that the concept is based on key elements, and he also introduced the 10 commitments. But how can these now be evaluated and implemented further down the line? So for that purpose, we need to operationalize the notion of a shared society for our project. So for comparison and analysis, we use 3 key dimensions based on the shared society concept. It's social cohesion, joint structures, and an enabling environment. So we have considered these elements in order to develop indicators for our evaluation. As you can see, this analytical framework and its 3 dimensions are informed by the commitments Clem introduced before. You can see, for instance, social cohesion, you can see promotion of diversity, or you can also see equal opportunity structures. So when you take a look at the figure, we first define joint structures as the extent to which responsibility to ensure the promotion of social cohesion, equity, and diversity that is clearly located within government structures, including a rule of law protection from discrimination and ensuring respect, diversity, and dignity, as well as adequate policy instruments, procedures, and political frameworks. So the next dimension, social cohesion, is understood as the progress toward the creation of a shared vision of society, including through social interaction, political participation, and reconciliation between divergent interests and hostilities. And third, the third dimension, it is an enabling socio-economic environment, which is understood as the progress towards equal access to resources and opportunities in a society, including by enabling learning environments and supporting community structures for minorities and marginalized groups. So these 3 dimensions of the shared societies are considered as interrelated and interdependent. Then we defined indicators for the purpose of our case, which you can see in the next slide, which are informed by our conceptual framework, including both quantitative and qualitative data, as you can see in the table. So on the left-hand side, you see the 3 dimensions I just introduced: social cohesion, joint structures, enabling environment. Then we have different aspects which are informed from the 10 commitments, and then we try to find indicators for our evaluation. In addition, we have identified steps toward to the respective dimension. Again, we use here, as you can see, assimilation, integration, and then the last one, the one we want to go to, social cohesion. We use that in order to be able to identify where the cities stand and where there is still a need for progress after the evaluation and the implementation phase. We could also use this table as orientation also during the project, for the project implementation, but also during the project implementation, so in all phases of project planning on the project. So we did that for all our dimensions. So this one is for the social cohesion, but we did it also for the joint structures, where you can also, on the left-hand side, you can see the aspects of joint structures, and then you can see that we want to move from the left-hand side to the right, the joint structures in a shared society. And we did it also for enabling environment. Again, you can see on the left hand side, you see the different dimensions, and then we move from more assimilative discourse to the shared society structure. So In summary, we can say that the concept helps us enormously in making us aware of the different levels and of the multi-level approach, and also the interconnections at the overall societal and political level that, to be honest, that we might not have included all in our analysis and also in our further and future project planning and implementation phase. So it gives us a great orientation and guidance without being prescriptive. And here I would say is the advantage and also disadvantage in one. So the scope needed is necessary not to use it as a one-fits-all concept, but means that the key components have to be transferred for a specific project and could also be time intense due to the many aspects and indicators. But as I can say, after our first phase of evaluation, the quality of the analysis and thus also the quality of the project planning and evaluation was absolutely worth it for our project. So then I hand over to Kuttner.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that, Melanie. All right, we're going to switch over to Ron. All right, Ron, you should be getting the prompt. All right, thank you.
Yeah, hi. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Wonderful. So let's do it in this mode. Good to be with everyone. A bit awkward that I cannot see faces, and it's a bit less dialogical than I would hope to, and dialogue will be a theme in what I will share today. I'm here to share with you how planning and monitoring and evaluation comes into play in a project that is relationally oriented to begin with. That the notion of co-construction, dialogue, and is central to the way that we approach shared society. First of all, just a few words about the program itself. I speak now not as an academic. I'm faculty member, Jennifer said, but I served as an academic advisor for Givat Chaviva, which is, I think, the largest NGO in Israel that does Jewish Arab shared society work in Israel. This is a map of Wadi Ara. It's an area in Israel, very sensitive, populated in mixed Jewish and Arab municipalities. And here we have neighboring communities that enter a shared communities program, a 4 to 5 year program in which we try to help neighboring Jewish and Arab communities develop a sense of shared identity in the region. So you don't need to worry about the map, but you have here about 5 different pairs that took part in this project starting in 2012, 2013 until about 2020. The program culminates with a book that I have written on the program. So at the end, I will provide a link. You can find it online. It's accessible, so you can have much information there. I don't have time to share with you the entire framework of how we work. We work on the educational level, working with educators and with the schools. On the communal level, we work within the communities with people on the ground on various community-based programs. And on the municipal level, here we have a photo of 2 mayors that are, in a way, the change agents. These are the conveners, I would say, of the program. They are the first to adopt the program and to make it somewhat top-down in the sense that the municipality takes charge and commits to a 4-year program. Then it's also a bottom-up in the sense of recruiting also people from on the ground, but it starts with the commitment of the municipalities, of the heads of the municipalities, the mayors in these communities. As I mentioned, this is a relationally oriented program. I will not go now into the discourse in the conflict resolution field between the problem-solving approach, the more interest-based approach, and the more relational approaches, the transformative approach to mediation, narrative approach to mediation. But there's a paradigm shift there that those speaking on behalf of the transformative narrative approach that say that we need to shift from the more interest-based, individualistically oriented approach. We believe that shared society work requires both. We start with working engaging with people's interests, with communities' interests, and we gradually develop the capacity to enter a more relational mindset, a more relational way of being, and a relational way of acting together and synchronizing the work, in the sense that they can develop something that is a co-construction and a joint environment for them both. I'll get to it in a moment. But in a way, you can say that developmentally, we move from participation mode, where people come into this project, Mayor said, yeah, let's do this project, but then people commit themselves and they're kind of dragging their feet. They have 150 other things to worry about. We have heads of people in positions within the municipality, heads of departments. Not necessarily it's the most important thing that they have in mind. So they're participating. Sometimes we, as facilitators, we want it more than they want in terms of the investment that they can put in. And then we gradually help them develop a collaborative mode with their neighboring communities, moving further towards partnership, which is where we enter a more relational mindset and a more a stronger way of being with others, which I will explain later. At large, I can say that, it's like a spiral where we start with the problem-solving process and where people participate. We identify needs and interests that they have. We try to identify shared interests and how to execute these shared interests. And then when we are able to execute certain things on the ground, when we are advancing certain projects that meet their needs, then they gradually develop the ability to become more collaborative. They are collaborators, more than participators. It takes a year, it takes 2, sometimes takes 3 years for people to go into that mindset. Hopefully that doesn't end here. Satisfaction of needs allows us to move in a later stage, in the 4th year, sometimes 5th years, sometimes 5 years is not enough, because it's a paradigm shift in the mindset of Jewish and Arab neighboring communities in Israel. It takes a lot. We're thinking of diversity. Also in the United States, we know that these processes, they sometimes take a lot of time, but hopefully gradually we get to a place where they are able to co-construct their shared reality and enter a place where it's a shared living on the more profound way. And in that respect, we move from negotiations to dialogue. We move from a more individualistic to a more relational mindset. We move from collaboration to partnership, as I mentioned. We move from coexistence to shared society. I would claim that there's a paradigm shift here from coexistence, where we're kind of separate but equal, coexisting next to each other. We know that doesn't work well, that this doesn't provide what we really need in order to develop shared living and livelihood in a shared society in the way that Clem and Melanie expressed before. We need to shift to a shared society. By now, you can understand that a shared society has a more relational component into understanding what we need to do. Now, again, I won't get you into this a photo from the book, where we have so many variables in which we can assess if we are on the participation level or the collaboration level or the partnership level. And part of our role as professionals is to observe and assess and be aware of what is needed in the facilitation process that would help them kind of push the boundaries and help them move to the later stage. That's part of the work that we need to do. That's part of the monitoring, and that's part of the evaluation of where we are in order to move forward in the program. Dialogue practices are such where we suspension our judgment, where we come with a sense of not knowing, doubt, insecurity, vulnerability. We kind of come together in order to explore. Okay, that's taken from David Bohm, Martin Buber. I wouldn't go too much into that. Interdependence. In dialogue, there's interdependence. We coordinate meaning, coordinate action, coordinate rhythm. Those of you familiar with Ken Gergen or the social constructionist approach, this is so much there. Ken Gergen, Sheila McNamee, the Social Taos Institute. There's so much in that way of perceiving dialogue. We're co-constructing our identities, okay? Is no longer like my separate identity, which I hold firmly to, but rather we are allowing our identities to evolve together and form something that the two separate identities did not have before. It brings, we need to have adaptability in order to do that. Now, cessation of polarization. Now, What I'm trying to say is that in a way, all of these qualities are also needed for our processes of evaluation. When we go to evaluate the program, we as facilitators, we as professionals, we need to walk the talk. We need to bring these very same values and skills of dialogue into our own processes of evaluation. It's a process of co-construction. It's a process of not knowing, exploring again and again what is needed, what is going on, what is not working, what is it that is an obstacle and a barrier to moving to the next level, what is called for, okay? How do I as a professional coordinate and synchronize with the rhythms where people are at and societies are at and communities are at? We need to be adaptive, okay? Life continues to throw curveballs at us, okay? In Israel, things on the political level, curveballs are thrown at us again and again, okay? As John Lennon said, life is what happened to you while you're too busy making other plans. Meaning, you know, I can come with academic models from here until tomorrow. That won't help if I'm unable to adapt to a situation that calls for adjustments and resynchronizing and rethinking where we at. So that's part of the work that we need to do. So I would say the most important thing moving into monitoring and evaluation is understanding that walking the talk and being able to be reflective and bring these dialogical approaches and skills into the monitoring process is so much needed. Okay. I will skip that because I want to leave time for questions. So we have a new definition of shared society from a relational approach, okay? It's an ongoing co-construction of our shared reality. It's an understanding of the self-identity as interdependent and impermanent and is changing in situ, evolving. There's a shared responsibility for the well-being, right? It's not just taking care about my turf and about my own livelihood of my group. I have a shared responsibility, relational responsibility, again called by the Taos Institute people. A systemic approach that sees the whole prior to drawing dividing lines. Okay, what is seen and what can be learned from the system that helped me from that elicit an understanding and insights about myself. Okay, I don't impose myself on the situation. It's a process of joint, ongoing learning and exploration. Okay, so inclusivity in that respect, social cohesion in that respect gets a new, more profound meaning. This is what I would say. Now, again, shared process evaluation calls for the very same qualities. So you can read the very same notions of what shared society is and read into them approaches or how to approach an evaluation process. So that speaks to what is called for and what is needed. I do not want to take more time. We see partnership that is a co-construction and it's something that evolving together rather than being more individualistically oriented. But I will stop here because I do want to leave time and I know that we need to be done within 15 minutes. So I do want to thank you. I put here all our emails and also the link to the Shared Society Initiative. And you have here the links to the book. Obviously, you'll need the one in English, not the one in Hebrew. In Arabic, the book, Partnership Between Arab and Jewish Communities for the Construction of Shared Societies, Givat Haviva model, which I mentioned before, is the book that kind of speaks for this approach. But again, today my focus was on monitoring and evaluation as a dialogic, a co-constructive process. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for going through so much information in a shortened period of time. Really appreciate it. I'm going to leave up Ron's screen during the Q&A portion, which is coming up now. I also want to point out that I have shared some recommended links from Ron in the chat box. So if everyone wants to check that out, the English version of the book and also more information on the work that Ron spoke about today and the topics covered. And also earlier I shared, and I will reshare again, a link on the Shared Society Initiative and also a link to our page on DME for Peace that has many, if not all of these resources. Also podcast recordings and a blog from Dr. Clem McCartney, who spoke today. So I encourage you all to check that out if you want to continue your interaction with this topic. So keeping our time in mind, I want to move on to the Q&A portion today. I also want to say that I have been experiencing some technical difficulties, so if I have to drop off and back in, I do apologize, but let's go. So thank you again, Clem, Melanie, and Ron. So for our Q&A portion in our discussion today, a couple of notes about our format for those of you who are unfamiliar with the Thursday Talks. You can submit a question or comment in two ways. The first is through the question function. The second is to click on the hand icon to raise your hand, which will allow us to unmute your microphone so that you can ask your question live and directly. When you submit your question to us, we ask that you submit your name and affiliation. Again, if you're able or so desire. Just a note, these talks are recorded and it will be posted on DME for Peace so that those who are not able to join us today can go back and listen, and you as well can go back and listen to the discussion and see the presentation slides, etc. So I did have one question come in. It's again about resources and where to find them. A question about where the commandments, a link to the Share Society commandments that Clem mentioned earlier. Are those in any of the links that you have given to me? Because it might be on the Shared Society website. Sorry, I just want to clarify.
Yeah, it's mentioned in the links that we gave you already. So they've been put up on the invitation to the meeting. It's the link to the booklet called The Call for Action.
Great. So you all will be able to find that on the DME for Peace page, and I'm assuming probably on the Shared Society Initiatives website, but if not, on the DME for Peace page. So thank you. And I want to encourage you to all start sending in your questions. I'm going to kick it off with a question that I had. My question is, what is your recommendation for practitioners or organizations that want to use the concept of shared societies in their work, for example, program development or their evaluative work, but they are constrained by donor timelines? Because it was mentioned, Ron, I know you said that it is a long-term effort and there are long-term shifts. So what recommendations would you have?
Clem, do you want to take it?
Well, I was actually going to refer it to Melanie because Melanie gave a good example there, and she mentioned the time issue as well, in that she was describing how you take the kind of concepts and you then apply them in developing your questionnaires and so on. And it probably does take a little bit longer to do the preparatory work of defining what you want to do. And as Rand said, you're doing that with the participant. You're not only doing that as an external person. I haven't got an answer for it, except what we're also trying to do is to persuade funders and other people to think in a less rigid, I would say, reductive way, that they have to allow time for allowing this to happen. And I think all of us as potential applicants for funds have to keep on battering the providers of resources that they need to be much more shared and inclusive and understand the holistic, complex approach that's needed if we're going to make real difference. Because we can go on spending money and say we've ticked all the boxes, but we may not be bringing about the kind of change that the funders themselves want.
Fantastic. We have a couple of raised hands, so that's very exciting, and questions coming in. So I'm going to unmute first Raleigh Rosen, and apologies for any name mispronunciations today, but Raleigh, I'm going to unmute your mic, and please feel free to proceed to ask your question.
מצד אחד כאילו הציפייה, כולנו תחת מתקפה, אז צריך להיות סולידריות עירונית ונעזור אחד לשני. מצד שני היה ברור שיש חילוקי דעות מאוד עמוקים על מה פרצה ומה לגיטימי ומה לא. קיצור, אמרו צריך ללמוד את זה. ואז היה פרויקט שאני ניהלתי...
I think she is on the phone with someone else. She should go to someone else.
Okay. Apologies, Raleigh. There might have been some misunderstanding. My apologies. I also, Stanford Sinzare, I see that you have a raised hand, but I don't see your microphone. So if you are able to unmute yourself, I'd be more than happy to have you ask your question. I don't have the opportunity to unmute you, so please feel free to unmute yourself, or maybe log out and log back in, and you might have the microphone ability. But again, apologies for any technical difficulties. But we also have another raised hand from another one of our colleagues. So I'm going to unmute you. Sorry for any mispronunciation, but Iguatu. And again, I really apologize, but I'm going to unmute you, and please feel free to ask your question.
All right, thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you.
You got it right.
Great, I wasn't too off.
Yes, I was wondering if the shared society initiative is enjoying the buy-in of both the Palestinian and Israeli authorities, and do you think there will be a common ground eventually? And is the project receiving adequate public support?
Could I hear you well? Is the project what? Sorry, could you repeat it?
Receiving adequate public support.
Ah, wonderful. So the first thing is that we should not confuse Israeli-Palestinian conflict with the internal Israeli tensions between Jews and Arabs being all citizens of Israel. Okay, I'm talking about Jews and Arabs that live within the boundaries and borders of the Israeli state country, and they are Israeli citizens, while Palestinians are in the PA, the Palestinian Authority, and they are Palestinian citizens. Obviously, they are connected, but these are different tensions. I would want to focus now on the shared society of the Israeli society, trying to develop, to move beyond polarization, which we have not only between Arabs and Jews. It's also about the secular and the religion, Orthodox, and there are divides, various divides. Okay, so I would say let's not confuse the two. Now, as to your second question, is a very good question. I did mention before that life keeps throwing curveballs at us, one of them being the political situation. When the political situation is tense and harsh, and when our government is more right-wing and less in favor of this kind of shared society initiatives, it makes life obviously more difficult. Part of the work that we need to do, and we ask ourselves, how do we do, is about how do we distribute? How do we make sure that people hear more about it? Here, unfortunately, I would say that, it's not news. Shared society work is usually not news. Polarization, blood, tensions, conflicts, these make the headlines. So it's a bit more difficult to make it sellable in order to get more of the public support. I would say that yes, still in Israel, a majority of the people are in favor of these programs, but usually Jews, when they will be in favor of a shared society project, they would mean a more coexistent project, which is we do want to maintain the level, the power play, and in the way that we are used to. Okay, now remember the hallmarks as Clem brought early on. It's a society that belongs to everyone. And this is different. So there's one thing to say, yes, we're in favor, but then the challenge of really moving to an understanding what that means, shared society with population that we are still somewhat fearful of, that's quite a challenge. I'm empathetic to the difficulty, I'm empathetic to the challenge, but we need to understand that this is what needs to be transformed.
Thank you so much, and thank you for asking the question yourself. All right, we have a few more questions that have rolled in, and being aware of our time constraints, I'm going to move on. Can you recommend a simple model for an organization with little or no resource, especially those of us in Africa?
A model for how we might go about our work, or a model for what it is we're trying to achieve. In a sense, we have to start where we are, and we have to move slowly. We may work, most of us, in all of the work we do in conflict transformation, conflict resolution, All of us are working in difficult situations. That's why we're working there. Like John F. Kennedy, we do it because it's hard. So we have to move at the pace at which we can move. I mean, one of the things that we would often do, and we prepared a thing we used to call a shared societies audit. It was a simple way of saying, take each of these factors, as Melanie showed she has done in her work, and you say, are we delivering on this? Are we actually giving allowances and space for people to participate? Are we ensuring that people have equal access, and so on and so forth? So first of all, doing a kind of a shared society audit of our own society, and then you've got to then you say, well, and what can we do about this? What is the things which are missing are the ones that we can make the biggest advance on, and also, as Rand said, the process is the way as well as the outcome. So that doing those kind of things, it's how can I involve as many different interests as possible in doing a shared analysis and a shared planning process to move forward.
Thank you so much for that, Clem. So we have time for one more question. This is from Kay Abbott. This again this is directed at Ron and touches a little bit on what you were mentioning before, but how did the recent riots in Arab and Jewish towns affect your approaches, especially in the Jewish state? How do minorities feel equal? And then also a question directed towards Melanie. How did your evaluation find immigrants were fitting in, and do they feel they need to integrate in order to be accepted? Oh, we have 3 questions, so feel free to tick these off one by one before we close out. And then for Clem, our question is, what percentage of society shares these principles as opposed to contentedly living side by side? So please, we can go in that order. Ron, if you want to start off, and I'm happy to re-ask the question to you if you need it.
I think I remember it, and please correct me if I do miss out on something. Obviously, the riots and the tensions that we experienced last month among Jews and Arabs, they can depress practitioners. They can depress those of us who are working towards shared society. It does kind of put a mirror into our face, asking the question, are we doing constructive work? Are we being helpful? Or is there something we're missing? And is there something we're missing takes me to my glass half full of my answer. And this is what I would say is encouraging. My framing would be that the riots and the difficulty that we saw are a demonstration of, an expression of the lack of shared society. They are an outcome, a derivation of the coexistence that we have in Israel, that we strive for, which maintains the power play, as I said, which maintains the Arab communities as being somewhat secondary. Okay, so my framing would be, okay, would you like to deal with what was surfaced, conflict as an opportunity, right? Would you like to really make use of the opportunity coming out of these riots? Please understand that we need to strive for and work towards shared living, so people don't feel that they are second-class citizens.
Thank you so much. And Ron, we're going to go on for a couple more minutes, so Melanie and Clem can answer the remaining questions before we close out. I realize you might have to leave, so I just want to say thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, Melanie, let me move on to you. How did your evaluation find immigrants were fitting in, and do they feel they need to integrate in order to be accepted?
Yeah, thank you for that question. Yeah, we try to involve immigrants in interviews and also surveys, so we have a good database here. Yes, I think migrants in Germany really think that migration and immigration and integration is a one-side process. So what we want to do in our project is that the project addresses both groups, so the majority group and also the minority groups, so that all people get averted. The whole integration process moves toward a two-sided process and also towards a shared society process, so where everyone can participate. And this is what we also try to do in our evaluation and of course also in our project implementation. So we have different fields of action in the shared society project. One is living in a district, where we try to get in contact with migrant groups and let them participate in the district, and also in other field of actions like administration, school, education, and yeah. So we really try to address both groups that to make steps toward a shared society.
Thank you again, Melanie. And Clem, if you could round us out for the last answer, what percentage of society shares these principles as opposed to contentedly living side by side?
Okay, and some don't even tentatively live side by side. Some people or places are quite hostile to other communities. I can't answer that question in a very precise way. One stage when I was with the Club de Madrid, we thought about creating a shared societies index, so we could have said this country scores highest and this country scores lowest. For various reasons, we didn't do that. Not least because there's a whole lot of other indexes which cover some of the things that we're concerned about. So there's the World Happiness Index, there's the Social Progress Index, there's the Wellbeing Index, there's the Global Peace Index. If we looked at all of those, we can see the same countries tend to appear at the top of all of them. They're measuring particular aspects which we think are important. And so we can say that there are some countries which figure well, like Iceland, which doesn't have a very diverse society, which New Zealand, which does have a very diverse society. There's a number of societies which score well in terms of people's relationships with each other and their relationships with government, which this is all about. There are others which, and even some of the countries which do well, they do well, they think they're doing well, but sometimes we speak to the minority communities there, they feel, well, we really only tolerate it. It's not really there yet. So the process is much more difficult. And one thing I would say, there's no country which is perfect and they're lacking in some things, and there's no country which doesn't do some of these things. I mean, we might look at places which we would immediately think, and I don't want to mention one, which are anything but a shared society, and you'll find some dimensions of a shared society being practiced there, but not enough, not very much at all. And so what we are doing, as I said in answer to the last question, I think we all have to look at our own countries and we have to say, what are we missing in? What do we need to do which move us more to society which we can all feel we belong in? Because ultimately we want to feel that we're all one family. But we feel nervous about other communities we think are threatening us or competing with us. And it's how do we expand that sense of who do we belong to so that we all can feel comfortable in the society and not feel that we're always having to be on our guard. I would say one last thing, and that is that one of the initiatives that we've taken is that RAN is editing along with another of our network, the next edition of the Conflict Resolution Quarterly, which is one of the reasons why we thought this was a timely moment to appear with you. So look out for the next Conflict Resolution Quarterly, because we hope it will pursue some of these issues and some of these discussions.
Wonderful. And I'd like to say, Clem, please feel free to share any resources or learnings that come out of the quarterly with us. We'd love to update the resource library and page with that information. So
we're more than happy. We're more than happy to listen to anything anybody wants to send to us on the, by email. We've given you our emails there.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for that. And I wanted to say thank you all for joining us today, and especially to Clem, Melanie, and Ron for everything. We really appreciate it. And I'm going to close us out. Thank you for sticking with us on this slightly longer version of the Thursday Talks, which occasionally does happen when we are having great conversation. So thank you all again for joining us. I dropped quite a few links in your chat box if you want to check them out today. And then also the last link I dropped is to the page on our resource library, which has pretty much every resource that was mentioned today and shared in the other links all in one place. So please feel free to check that out. And as Clem said, our hosts today are more than happy to receive your emails, which Ron shared on the last slide. So again, thank you for joining us. We will actually be taking August off, a little holiday for the DME for Peace Thursday talk team, but we will be back in September, and we will be covering all things to do with the story of resilience and fragilities. Basically, we're going to be covering our sister site, Connexus, all the wonderful work they're doing around the impact of COVID-19, not only on horizontal cohesion in conflict-affected countries, but also the amazing conflict snapshots around COVID-19 and conflict dynamics that they have currently been working with the ICSP project on releasing, which you can find on the Connexus website. And if you haven't been there already, I encourage you to go, but it's going to be a wonderful month in September. But for August, I want to say I hope everyone has a wonderful, maybe summer vacation time off. Everyone has earned it. And thank you for joining us today. We will talk to you soon.